So what if I told you there was a formula for originality, a certain equation that you could put together that makes some of the most famous creatives unique? I'm gonna call this the George Lucas formula. And if you follow by this step-by-step system, trust me, you'll be able to make something original. Or not really, but you'll see what I mean at the end of this. I want you to take a look at a TV show, for example, like Mr. Robot. Mr. Robot is probably one of the most original TV series that's come out within the last 10 years. That is very subjective, and I 100% throw my opinion at that. Everything from the way it's shot, it's sort of realistic yet surrealistic storytelling. All of it seems to resemble something that's very unique. I would say there's nothing out there like Mr. Robot. But if I were to start to look at what influences Mr. Robot, I'd all of a sudden start to realize that it is far from original.
Why?
And in fact, it's actually very unoriginal. It's literally The Matrix, Fight Club, and Sam Esmail's own style sort of blended together to create something that feels relatively unique. Esmail. Now, he too has used the Lucas formula, which kind of goes like this. Back when Lucas was coming up with the idea for Star Wars, he sort of compiled together his 3 favorite kind of movies and made it into one. It was Westerns, Flash Gordon, and science fiction movies. Those 3 put together creates Star Wars. Now, each individual one has sort of been done to death, or at least in that time frame, and 2 together would sort of seem a little weird, but the pairing of all 3 together created something that became an iconic films trilogy and now a film franchise that was worth over billions of dollars. How much did Lucas make?
Let me just talk about the upcoming Star Wars. How do you feel about it?
Well, it's,
So if we look at the Star Wars franchise as a whole, it is incredibly unique, and its originality created this franchise, which then developed more and more original concepts, stories, and ideas. But if you look at the origins of how it was created, put together, they create something brand new. So now once you know this formula, the pairing of 3, start to look at anything you love that you feel like is very unique and original, from your favorite TV shows, movies, music compositions, to even YouTubers. You take a look at what they have, and if you divide them by 3, you start to see what their origins are.
Who can save you now?
And this isn't to say that these people who've created these brand new things, these incredible products, ideas, designs, and movies or shows that you watch are unoriginal. They've just been able to figure out how to create this concept. Now, I'm not saying they're like, oh, let me just check out the George Lucas formula. I swear, maybe I'm probably the only person who's maybe noticed this. But if you look at your favorites, they all have their 3 origins. Maybe there's 4, but I've realized that 3's kind of the thing. This is an original piece of art. Well, when you look at it deep enough and long enough, after a couple seconds, you realize it's very unoriginal. It's the pairing between Star Wars, Pulp Fiction, and some sort of Andy Warhol style. But as a whole, creating and putting those 3 together, it's not ripping off of one thing or another. It's taking 3 and putting it together to create something pretty unique. So this next thing you're probably gonna be wondering is, why does this work? How does this work? And how do you apply it into your stuff? I'll show you. The reason why the Lucas formula works is because it's not directly riffing or ripping off of one piece of art. In fact, it's taking multiple. And so if you were to take this example and only maybe use one piece of art as reference, let's say you're working on your next movie and you only take one thing as inspiration. What ends up happening is the audience associates that piece of art to the other piece of art out there. You're all of a sudden incorporating comparison, which then makes people almost think of the link and connection more than what they're thinking of your piece of art. So you're doing a 1-by-1 comparison the entire time, which is distracting and also is really hard as an artist to sort of work off of, because all you're doing is looking at that single reference point. The better option is to be maybe influenced by 2 things. And so the pairing of 2 does work, where essentially you take 2 concepts and throw it into the mix. I would recommend, if you do this, then also bring in sort of what your own original quality is, which I'll talk more about at the end of the video. But you take someone else's quality, put it into the mix, and now you have 3 things that you're sort of pulling at, 1 of your own and 2 of somebody else's. And what that ends up doing is creating something that has 2 reference points and 2 comparison points, and then 1 of your own to draw from, which then in return creates something that is relatively unique. That's basically like George Lucas taking science fictions and Westerns and piecing them together, and that sort of gives you most of what Star Wars is. Okay, so now let's add in the pairing of the three influences to blend it together. So let's take a look at filmmaker Peter McKinnon, for example. I use him as a reference a lot because he's a really good example piece. But essentially, you take a look at the work that he's done, and it is its own standalone originality, right? A lot of people who try to take the Peter McKinnon quality and style, you're probably looking at one of them, and put it into their own videos, all of a sudden gets coined as a copycat. But that's because I'm only using one of his references. But let's take a look at him, for example. If you were to split his originality into pieces, you would recognize that it's kind of a blend between Casey Neistat, I'd say the influence of like punk rock music videos, and then the entertaining quality of documentary filmmaking. Now, I'm not saying any one of these creatives have looked at a chart of three different, like a pie chart of three things and be like, oh, what's my George Lucas formula? But it's something good to be able to articulate how you can use this sort of style to then influence yours so that you can create something that's pretty unique and original. So the most important part of this equation is not necessarily what you're being influenced by, but the fact that you're allowing yourself to be influenced by more than one thing. What we tend to do as creatives is we go down the rabbit hole and look at one type of creative or at least one genre of creativity and then sort of stop there. But the best concepts come from the merging of diverse influences. Going back to George Lucas, for example, if you look at Star Wars, a Western and sci-fi could not be any further apart. They're very opposite ideas. And yet when they were blended together, they created a concept that made waves. Now, back when George Lucas was originally pitching this, no one liked the idea. They thought it was completely stupid. And he had to go back and make a movie like American Graffiti before being recognized and known enough to be able to make a full-length version of what his original concept was.
Boy, watch that knife.
But this rare pairing works for filmmakers across the board, from Quentin Tarantino, Christopher Nolan, to the Wachowskis. So the final thing that I want you to put into this sort of equation, because I actually think it's more important to incorporate you part of that circle of three. Now, what is your main qualities, your main traits? What do you apply to that circle of influence? What I would actually say is it's your limitations or errors. I talk about this in a couple other videos, but essentially take a look at all of the things that you don't have and then apply that, because what you're looking at for influence from other people is all the things they do have. You're looking at Western movies and all of their qualities that they have, and science fiction films and all the qualities they have, and then applying whatever things you actually don't have, because that's what you are. You're an accumulation of the things you don't have. And as no, that sounds sort of depriving, but the more you take a look at the things that you want to have, the less you are you. The more you view the things that you actually have, which maybe it's the viewing of less things, then that is what you apply. For example, the way I've started shooting my vlogs recently is sort of this weird accumulation of three different styles. So I sort of take what I have, which are my limits. I don't have these crazy destinations that I'm going to. I'm not traveling the world. I don't have the most ridiculous of gear. I've got my camera tripod and just super sensitive microphone. I put those together as sort of my toolkit. And then I look at my favorite filmmakers, which would be the filmmaking style of, let's say, Edgar Wright and David Fincher paired in sort of a documentary-esque vlog style. And those three pieced together create this very unique formula of how I shot my sort of vlog series. But then how I've edited it is a completely different formula, where I use this Edgar Wright style documentary filmmaking style paired with a vlog and then edited sort of like a music video / montage. And together it creates this very unique style vlog-esque thing that no one's seen. Now, is this the formula to make something successful, to sell, to make millions of dollars? It could be, or it just might make something that is just different. And at the end of the day, when it comes to consuming content, creating content, are you wanting to make something that is the exact same as someone else's that uses a formula to make money? Or do you want to make something that is unique and original to you? So I'll put that out to you guys. Sometimes, you're getting hired by a job and you need to make money, and maybe it is to remove some of the influences of yourself and just to use somebody else's, but try applying new things to your influence circle, your influence reservoir. That could be listening to new music, playing different bands on the radio. Why did I say radio? Or lifting a camera and holding it from a different direction. All I'm saying is take a look at 3 different things and put them together. Look at the opposites and see if they could connect somehow. Is it a podcast paired with a vlog paired with a Hollywood filmmaker? And will that make something? Is it a Western film and science fiction paired with Flash Gordon? Or is it Casey Neistat paired with music video filmmaking, paired with documentary style shooting? You never know, but whatever that formula ends up being, it will create something that inspires you as a creative, inspires others, and might just make the waves that you're wanting to make.